Hi everyone, thank you for joining. I am Gopal Khanal. Today I will be talking about how water abstraction to meet the irrigation demands aggravates fishing threats to river dolphins in Nepal. Natural disturbance regimes are important to maintain the ecological integrity of floodplain river systems. Most species inhabiting these floodplain river systems have evolved their life stories in response to the flow variability induced by these natural disturbance regimes. While positive impact of these natural disturbance regimes are well recognized, sometimes they cause abrupt modification in the habitat. For example, they can shift the river course change, and these can negatively impact the species if such natural disturbance regimes lead their distribution to shift into suboptimal habitat. Often, natural changes caused by disturbance regimes intersect social system of land and water management. For example, these changes can shift habitat from protected channel to unprotected channel, exposing species into various risks. However, how such natural changes interact with local habitat protection regimes and affect species has received little scientific attention. Changing climate pattern is expected to make these disturbance regimes much more uneven and abrupt. And in such context, it is very urgent to understand the responses of the species inhabiting this response to these abrupt changes in disturbance regimes. So, in this study, we present one such case study where flood induced natural changes in disturbance regime caused existing channel to shift from protected to unprotected channel, exposing endangered species of river dolphins to novel risk associated with fishing. Ganges river dolphins are subspecies of Asian river dolphins, and they are native to Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. They are classified as an endangered in IUCN Red List criteria. In Nepal, less than 100 river dolphins are expected to occur. And Karnali is the only river system in Nepal that has potentially viable population of river dolphins. We conducted this study in Karnali River, which is a perennial river. It originates from Tibetan Plateau, flows through the Rocky Mountains of Nepal, and eventually forms the tributary of the main Ganges river system. In the subtropical basin just below the Chisapani Gorge, the Karnali River bifurcates into two channels. The Karnali Channel in the west arm, which is unprotected, and it's about 40 to 45 kilometer long, and Gerua, it's a protected channel which flows through Bardia National Park. Before 2010, Gerua used to have 10 to 15 river dolphins with an average depth of 2 meter, whereas dolphins were virtually absent from the Karnali River because it had river depth too low to support any river dolphins. So in 2010, a big flooding event occurred that led to complete shift of main flow from protected Gerua channel to unprotected Karnali channel. And this provided an interesting ecological setting to examine the distributional response of river dolphins to this natural flood-induced change in habitat. Uh, and investigating distributional response of river dolphins is very important because that can provide insights into their adaptive resilience. So, in this study, we aim to understand responses of river dolphins to change in river course. We wanted to ask whether river dolphins shift their habitat to Karnali in response to flow change, or they continue to stay in Gerua. So, river dolphins might have faced some sort of trade-offs in choosing the habitat. And we also wanted to examine the influence of river depth and fishing intensity on river dolphin counts. We also wanted to assess the hydrological trends in the Karnali River. So what we did was we conducted pre-flood survey in 2009 before habitat change and post-flood survey from 2012 through 2015. Basically, we conducted dolphin counts along 1 kilometer long sampling segments. In total, in Gerua, we had 35 segments, whereas Karnali had 46. We measure river depth and fishing intensity across these 1 kilometer sampling segments, and fishing intensity index represented the magnitude of fishing for each river segments. So we also assessed the rainfall and discharge pattern in the Karnali Chisapani over 15 years from 2000 to 2014. So we didn't find any significant hydrological trends in terms of annual rainfall and annual discharge over 15 years at Karnali Chishapani Hydrological Station. So what does this means is any changes in the downstream water profile or depth profile may be due to factors other than natural flood-induced hydrological patterns. So we noticed we found complete shift in water level in Gerua and Karnali. The water level gone up in Karnali, but it gone down in Gerua over the years due to flood-induced habitat change. We also noticed consistent decline in river depth after 2012. It did increase in Karnali up after 2010, but it again started declining in both Gerua and Karnali after 2012. And this coincided with the water abstraction by the irrigation canal called Rani Jamarakular Irrigation Project, whose modernization began sometime around 2012. So because there was no any significant hydrological trends upstream, uh, so any change in the water depth profile may most likely be due to the irrigation channel, and there are cases and and water abstraction has been done by irrigation canal. So what is much more interesting is the depth reduction in depth is much more pronounced in intervening segments that connect the deep pool habitats. So this severed the longitudinal connectivity between deep pools. You note in these figures from 2012 to 2015 in Karnali, the first four five segments and the downstream segments from 38 to 46 segments. The river depth is fairly consistent across the years, but there are consistent decline in river depth that connects these deep pool habitats. And this resulted in the downstream shift of river dolphins and reduction in dolphin numbers. There were 11 dolphins in 2012, and 2015 there were just 6 river dolphins. So while the depth continued to decrease over the years, fishing intensity did increase over the years. So there was increase in fishing intensity in Karnali, but it remained fairly stable in Gerua. And this led to two bycatch of river dolphins. Increasing fishing intensity led to two bycatch of river dolphins 2012 and 2013. And again, this occurred in the intervening segments where the depth reduction was much more pronounced. That joins the upstream segments and downstream segments. And again, this bycatch even coincided with the modernization of irrigation canal called Rani Jamarakular Irrigation Project. The dolphin encounter rate did increase in Karnali, but it gone to zero in Gerua. And these dolphin counts were largely restricted to Gerua in pre-flood in 2009, represented by the white circles. But they completely switched to Karnali in 2012 through 2015 post-flood. So, zero inflated regression models showed that the river depth had consistent and positive influence on dolphin counts. Whereas regression models uh, showed that in 2012 fishing intensity had non-significant impact except at lower depths, as indicated by the negative coefficient of the negative slope of the interaction coefficient. After 2002, after 2012, fishing intensity had consistent negative influence on river dolphin counts. When same analysis was conducted all years together, fishing intensity had most consistent negative impacts at lower depths, as shown by the interaction coefficient. But by themselves, fishing intensity single impact didn't have any significant influence. So what this shows is that the fishing impact on river dolphins is consistent on the level of water. So at lower depths, fishing impact was much more severe. So, as we showed that the post flood movement to Karnali likely become an ecological trap for river dolphins because they move to new habitat where they fish higher fishing threats. their adaptive preferences for flow became maladaptive in the Karnali. So we also saw that the reducing fishing impacts without maintaining minimum water depth may be of limited value, particularly in the Gerua. So this, the hydrological patterns were consistent over the years, and there has been consistent declines in water, and which is likely due to the water abstraction by irrigation canals. And this raises the question of how much water should be diverted for agriculture and how much should be maintained in the river for the river dolphin persistence. And this potentially requires some sort of realistic scenario building exercises. For example, in general, for the Karnali, fishery regulation should be brought in sync with the maintenance of adequate river depth. But for the Gerua, because there is virtually no water, retaining the requisite flow to the existing habitat will benefit river dolphins, because that can switch the river dolphin distribution from the Karnali to Gerua, and that will also benefit the other megafauna that depend on hydrological plane. Hydrological plane. Uh, um, so the key takeaways from our study is that these natural habitat induced channel changes can also have negative impact, and that can they can influence the exposure to anthropogenic risks. And even in unregulated rivers like Karnali in Nepal, irrigation demands cause critical declines in river depth. It's not necessary that the rivers have to be dammed uh, to to impact the river dolphins or any freshwater species. Even in unregulated rivers, um, the irrigation demands can cause critical declines in depth. And ecological flows can help mitigate water abstraction impacts on dolphin bycatch in fishing nets to some extent. With these, I would like to acknowledge these agencies for their administrative and funding support. This talk is based on our paper that we got published in Biological Conservation. Please refer to this paper if you want to know more about our work. And let's connect. Thank you.